All right, quite a crowd here tonight. Thank you all for being here. And let me just start by saying it's such a beautiful film. Thank you for making it. Thank you for sharing it with us tonight. And thank you for coming all this way to talk about it.
Thank you very much.
Holy God.
Your buddy from Belfast, where everybody knows you.
Hey, buddy! Your mask on, idiot!
We're looking to cleanse the community a wee bit.
You wouldn't want to be the odd man out in the street.
Touch my family and I'll kill you.
Are we gonna have to leave Belfast?
We'll fight this together.
This is it. This is what?
This is war.
We're living in a civil war.
What do you want?
I want my family with me. I want you.
Kenneth, to kick things off, I read recently that you wrote the script in a very short period of time during the pandemic. Could you talk about just how long you've been working on this, how long the writing process was?
I will, and thank you, and thanks everybody for coming tonight. We appreciate it. I guess the writing process was about 8 weeks and 50 years. I'd wanted to write something about Belfast for a long time. I'd made many notes over many decades, and then the introspection and the silence at the beginning of this lockdown sent me back to another lockdown, which was the one that we experienced at that time. It was one of those things that sort of poured out, and then it gathered a momentum of its own. I showed it to my brother and sister, who were the two people who I wanted to read it first, as they were the first two people to see the film in its finished form, and really it depended on them being happy that we were writing about a version of events inspired by what our family went through, and then the momentum into making the film and meeting up with all these amazing people followed thereafter.
So I've read, in several of the reviews I've read, it refers to this as being semi-autobiographical, and I don't know if that's a term that you would use, but...
Well, I just think inevitably at a distance of 50 years, and when you deliberately set out to sort of look from the point of view of a 9-year-old, I think that there will be not necessarily a documentary kind of truth, but you hope there'd be an emotional truth. And also there was a desire not to make it merely, personal therapy or a sort of recreation of specific events, but hopefully begin with something that could open itself up to do what we've been thrilled to hear in lots of cases the film has done, which is to open up the individual audience members to thoughts of their own childhood and related kind of events. So to be not literal and be semi-autobiographical maybe allows for that to happen more.
Mm-hmm. You know, when I heard about the film, I for some reason deliberately chose not to read much about it at all. And when I saw the film, I went in not knowing what to expect. And when I saw it, I was so surprised by this is an approach to the troubles in Belfast at that time that I have never seen portrayed on screen before, and the warmth of the family, and that's the center, the core of the family. They're living through that sectarian violence and all the political context, but it's really a story of this family that is so powerful.
Well, certainly that seemed to be the center of it, and both Ciaran and Jamie, without talking on their behalf, were aware of what also the Belfast version of that was often characterized by, which was passion and humor as well, a very particular Belfast sense of humor.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear from the cast about Jamie and Caitriona. Maybe you could start talking about how you created your relationship once you were on set and diving into this, because the relationships in this family are so strong and powerful, and there's warmth and humor and so many nuances to your performances. If you could just talk a bit about when you got involved and how you you created that marriage?
I was involved before Caitriona, so I didn't know when I got involved in it. I didn't know it was going to be Caitriona. I'm going to give Ken a load of credit for, considering and understanding and hoping that we'd be a good match together based on meeting us. And then it's one of those things where we really just hit it off. Caitriona is one of, if not the easiest person I've ever worked with. We were thrust into this uncomfortable, the first time we met was a dance rehearsal. And if anything's going to bring two people who can't dance very well together, it is trying to teach them how to dance. So I think we bonded pretty quickly over our lack of ability.
Our amazing coordination, yeah. Well, no, I just think, so much of the relationship was on the page. I think when it's written so well like that, so much of your work is done. But it was really organic. I mean, I think, we had this beautiful day, one of the first days as well, where Ken got Judy, Ciaran, Jamie and myself in a room, and we all just sat around and talked about, Ken was very clever in the questions he was asking us about, our childhoods, our parents, how different things would have gone in our lives. And I think that also broke down barriers very quickly, and we sort of all bonded from that. And, I think, it was very instantaneous. I mean, Jamie and I have weirdly a very similar trajectory, even though we'd never really met. And I don't know, we just have a lot of things in common, so it was just very easy.
The rehearsal for the dancing, was that for the wake sequence? Was that?
Yeah.
Because that scene is amazing. I mean, I'd love to hear you talk about that as well, because it almost felt. Was that the wake following the death of?
Well, it was many. You may have some experiences yourself, but it was many experiences where we had. Sorry, whoops. Of the yin and yang, the celebratory lunacy of, especially after my own father slept in the same room as his father for the five days and nights that he was laid out, as everybody came to see him. And I think by the time that was all over, you really needed to let some steam off, and so singing and dancing were definitely key.
It's a beautiful scene. Jude, I'd love to hear if you would talk about how you got into this film, how you learned about it, what the audition process was like.
Well, I remember initially I sent through a self-tape, just a normal self-tape, and once I got called back, I found out who would be writing it and directing it, and I ran about my house for about 5 minutes screaming. And just the chance to work with all of these actors is just amazing. And as my film debut, this is just amazing and really, really lucky. And it was a few callbacks, and in the last callback, actually, that was the first time I ever met Ken, and he was such a lovely, down-to-earth person that you could sit down and make friends with. Maybe not talk about football, though, because he supports Tottenham.
Excellent.
I think we should just ask him all the questions.
I think we should. I think y'all can just roll back a few feet, No, but Jude, actually, if you could talk a little bit more about your experience filming. This wasn't your first time on a film set, I don't believe, but it was one of the first. Am I right?
This was the first.
This was the first. Okay.
The first.
So amazing. So, okay, well, Kenneth, if you could talk more. I mean, I asked the question about how the centrality of this family and the relationships, but could you talk a bit as a director, sort of what do you try to foster on? How do you try and create the on-set experience for your actors? Because I mean, you've directed so many great films always with incredibly strong performances, and I'm just curious, was your approach here similar to how you worked on other films, or did you approach this differently in what you were building on set?
Well, I think you try to find the way, whatever the way is for that particular project and this particular group of actors who were very, very open. So, I mean, a specific example with this one, who was very kind, Judi Dench, her eyesight's not terribly good, and we provided her with a copy of the newspaper that she reads as the character. It's called The People's Friend, and it's a religious journal, but it's mainly full of sort of Mills and Boon's romantic stories about, in carrying torches for doctors who don't realize their lodger is in love with them, etc. And Ciaran, do you remember this? In lieu of Judy's failing eyes, read a story from The People's Friend to Judy in rehearsal, sort of across a crowded room. And it was a magical moment because it was it's as if we'd instantly shifted into their relationship. And she was listening. You read it ever so well.
Thank you very much.
And you talk about that.
Yeah, but I think it's got to do with the way that Ken very quickly and very astutely brought us all together. As Caitriona was saying, within an hour of us all meeting each other at four ends of a very wide, long table, we kind of all knew each other's childhood. And therefore, we were open enough to know where we all came from. And therefore, what Ken, I think, was using it for was for us to be open enough to use our knowledge of each other's childhood to be able to connect instantly with the person that you want to do. And for Judy and I, it was great because we had never met. And she is such a dynamo. I mean, her instinct is extraordinary, and her ability to turn a sixpence. I know Ken knows that they've worked together so long, but for us to think into believing that we had already had 50 years of marriage together, the preparation, the very quick and astute preparation that Ken kind of suggested we go for, was ultimately hugely useful for the work we had to do together.
The other thing I'd say, though, which Ciaran and the others weren't, is that's really only possible if that group of actors are generous enough to do that. Because obviously it's a very vulnerable thing. You don't know people, and maybe you don't want to tell them things that are quite sort of personal to you. And there was a great deal of generosity. And I think once you see that that's happening, you kind of all hold hands together and also acknowledge, gosh, that is going to be part of the DNA of this piece. So, and for me, it was a big thrill. I went home feeling that there was a big heart, a big communal heart beating in that rehearsal room, and it was because they were ready to, generously but unshowily give of themselves.
I mean, whatever you did in that process was fully manifest on the screen, because I felt like I was living with that family and just immediately drawn in, and the film unfolds at the pacing of the film is interesting. It's not rushed or overly dramatic, but there's a steady build, a progression of events of like, what's going to happen? Are they going to have to move? How it's affecting Buddy? I mean, it's, every little emotional nuance is there on the screen.
I was just sorry I didn't live long enough to attend my own wake, because it seemed fantastic fun altogether.
It was amazing. There was a horn section.
Them were angels.
Kenneth, could you talk a bit about the decision to shoot in black and white, and also to have that initial burst of color at the beginning?
Jamie Dornan and Caitriona Balfe both rang me and said, we think we both look even more beautiful in black and white, and we insist that we are photographed in black and white. I think that was it, wasn't it? It was your agents to begin with, and then it was you two. It was to do with feeling that, that curious thing with black and white, when people use that phrase, it's all there in black and white, as if it's additionally authentic to have that, even though it's not how we see the world. For me, it has this paradox of being sort of forensic. You look, because there's less color to look at. Harris, our cinematographer, said color describes people and black and white lets you feel people. And somehow this poetic dimension to something that was also producing a very sort of authentic quality, the kind of quality that you might see in a great reportage photograph, we were sort of after as well. But we also wanted color to be about the Belfast that is now, and also colour to be about the imagination of Buddy as the cinemas from this neck of the woods explode in his mind. But I do think everybody looks better in black and white, to be honest. And there's a wonderful sort of monochromatic palette that is beautiful. Jamie often tells me it was sunny when he was growing up in Belfast. It was always raining. What about you, Ciaran? What was the weather like when you were growing up?
Always raining.
So black and white.
The bursts of color you alluded to in the middle of the film, when Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and things like that, really, I felt like this film was also a love letter to cinema. Like I was imagining this piece, I assume, is autobiographical. That you saw those films as a child growing up in Belfast.
Yeah, and we had. Now, hey Jude, had you ever seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang before we showed it to you on the set?
I've seen clips of it, but not like.
Hold your mic up.
Oh. I've seen clips of it before, but I haven't watched the full film, no.
And Jamie and Caitriona, had you seen it? Because one of the pleasures I had when we were shooting that was I tried to withhold the pieces from you as much as possible. Had you seen either of those films, or Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or A Million Years BC?
Definitely Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but I not the other one.
Yeah, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, big favourite in my house. Hadn't seen A Million Years BC, no. No, I should though. Looks good.
So with the decision to shoot, so obviously you were filming this during the pandemic and operating under pandemic conditions. So before we came out, you were telling me that was a constructed set. The street that they lived on was completely built. So can you talk a bit about just whatever you care to share about the challenges of shooting under COVID? Were there things that you enjoyed about it that were enhanced the experience for you, or was it just you had to just deal with like practical limitations for health and safety?
I think freedom means having no choice. So we had no choice, and there was a freedom to do with the building up of some family feeling that was, partly because these guys were all in a bubble, and then there was a certain kind of quiet ritual. The props folk would go in first, and then they'd come out of the set, and then the electrics would go in, and then they'd come out, and then the actors would arrive. There'd be very few people. And although it was true of Belfast, whenever the sun did shine, we did open the windows and let the air in. All of the windows that are open in this film are partly to do with airflow and COVID regulations. Wow. So anytime we could get the windows open, we did. The weather satisfied us in that regard as well. But everybody had to test every day. Everybody tested for 2 weeks before they came in. How did it feel to you? Was there something about the routine of that was scary? I know, as with my producer hat on, it was pretty sweaty every morning when the tests came in. How was it for you guys, the COVID of it all?
I mean, it's one of those things I think very quickly it becomes just routine. But I do think there is again that kind of bonding thing that happens because of it. Even with all of our crew who were absolutely amazing. Because it was such a small group of us, I think we all got to know each other very well, and I think it adds, I don't know, there was that kind of, we were the only, I think it was us and Batman, right? We're the only 2 films up, so there was sort of a pioneering quality to it too.
Yeah, and sort of gratitude, sense of gratitude and privilege, and sort of the preciousness of being able to do it. I did think, we had, if you recall, we gave first jobs to about 10 drama students who had their first professional work on this, and they'd been, they had no necessarily prospect of doing anything. So that energy coming onto the set was also amazing, as was, 85-year-old Judi Dench's, who was thrilled to be back and working and bringing that kind of energy. Her late husband Michael Williams used to say the problem with Judy is every day is Christmas bloody morning.
Caitriona, I wondered if you could talk a bit about your role. I mean, the whole family dynamic is so powerful and everybody's connected, but I felt like you were the beating heart of this family, and coming to that painful the scene when you finally decide it's time to go was so powerful. Anything you'd care to share about sort of how you approached that moment? And
well, the thing about Ma, which I loved so much, is that in her little street, in her little community, she is so confident in herself and knows who she is, but anything beyond that is totally beyond her comprehension, and she becomes a little child even thinking about it. And it was that thing of being she wanted to protect her children, but for her the only way she knew how was in this street where she knew. And it took her so long to sort of get to the point where she realized that she had to step outside of herself for the good of her kids. I in preparation for this role, I watched so many interviews of women from Belfast and women from the north who talked about, how they were holding families together during this time or struggling against that. And, as an Irish woman, it was so emotional watching all of these stories. Like we represent men very well in this film and show the beautiful side and their softness, but for a lot of women in the north, they were really, they had to sort of hold down the fort when these horrible things were going on around them, and they carried the weight of what was going on, I think, more, and especially in terms of the families. And so I just wanted to show that and to sort of honor those women, and
Another scene where what you were just talking about really comes through is when you march Buddy back to the grocery store to return the detergent. Like you're taking him through like kind of a terrifying situation, but he's going to return that damn soap.
That was such a great scene to film. It was so good. I mean, this one was buzzing for days afterwards.
I bet.
Yeah, I definitely, we had the screening on Thursday, and my mum was in the audience, and I kind of said, there's a lot of my mum in that performance, and then I felt really bad. I was like, that I was, I think there's a ferocity to Irish mammies. They love you fiercely, but they will give you a clip in the ear if you step out of line. So it's great. I mean, that it's just that passion and that love, and it's like it's with fear as well. You don't want anything to happen to them, so it's that tough love that comes through.
Jamie, I wanted to ask you about one moment in the film when you're talking to Buddy. It's late in the film where he's realizing he's going to be away from the girl that he's interested in, and you say, and he references that she's Catholic, and you say, well, there's no issue as long as people are kind and good and decent. It doesn't matter what tribe you come from. And I felt like that really was the point of view of the film, and also of you in that moment. It's a beautiful moment between you and Jude. I'm not sure if the question is for you or for Kenneth, but that sentiment feels like it drives the film, and it's a very hopeful sort of.
I mean, I think there's definitely something in that what you said there about being one of the messages that's within the film. If you can get people thinking along those lines more in that part of the world, it would be a very good thing. But I think that applies to any division in any part of the world. If you can find acceptance and respect for the other side, or what are deemed to be the other side, then that's the only way you're going to solve any of these problems. So it was lovely to be able to play that scene. I very fortunately was brought up that way where there wasn't an us and them in my household or in any of my way of thinking or the community I grew up in. So to be able to impart that to my pretend son in the movie was important to me, and I think it's important that that message is in the film.
Yeah. At that moment, the film feels, it's 1969 Belfast, but it felt very contemporary to me. It feels like the film speaks to the moment that we're in right now, both in terms of the sense of lockdown, but also that, we are factionalized and we are in different tribes, and there's I don't know if that was animating your desire to make this film at this time. Were you thinking about that at all, as the moment that we're living in right now, politically or culturally?
I think probably inevitably. I think it's when Billy Clanton says, I'll keep it simple. You're either with us or you're against us. I think that's I understand where it comes from, but it's not a civilized way to run a society. I don't think you have to. There's so many layers and grey areas between strong positions held by people who may oppose each other, and although it is very difficult, there's no question about that. The necessity for understanding has never been greater, and of course the understanding is hard work. You have to sort of not be entrenched, and you have to accept that a passionate point of view need not be undermined by listening to another passionate point of view and considering it. In fact, your passionate point of view might be enriched by that. It's all easy to say, it's hard to do. And so inevitably, you were talking about this as well, weren't you? Just the other night, the tribalism, our version of tribalism.
Yeah, I mean, the peace process in the Northern Ireland happened in '97, I think, was the Good Friday Agreement, and it was a long, long time coming. And Jamie, too, we would all, I guess, be supporters of integrated education in the North of Ireland. So because we have a system whereby church and state, at the ages of 4, kids go to different schools, and it's something that's very important to us that integrated education becomes a major force in the healing of what's happened in the province of the North of Ireland. And it just makes complete sense, because people, as we know, aren't born with racism or hatred or sectarianism, and it's informed. And the idea is, once you leave them to themselves and they share ideas, they can make their own mind up, and it won't be as divisive as the culture that we have come from. And now we're 24 years on down the line, and there's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot of work to do, and we recognize that. And there are a lot of good people at home, a lot of good people still working to heal the divisions and go out into the different communities and get them together. But this rift runs deep, and so the only hope is that we can keep pushing forward with positive agendas and keep trying to connect with each other.
I also want to ask you, Kenneth, about the music in the film. It's Van Morrison, start to finish, and both older songs, but he composed things for the film as well. Could you talk about the experience of working with him on the film? It's a fantastic score. And
well, thank you. I mean, he's a great artist. When I was at the age that Jude is in the film, he spent, it seemed, like 2 years almost right at the top of the charts with a revolutionary album in Astral Weeks. So he was a big hero to us. I approached him about this nervously, did a sort of telephonic audition with him, in which the apparently famously grumpy Van sort of ran his eye over me, or his ear over me, but he was not remotely grumpy. He was very engaged with a story about leaving Ireland and being away. He seems as though that spoke to him. But of course, he has the soul of Belfast in him, and he has this orchestra of a voice. And deep musicality, incredible gift for melody and atmosphere and mood and depth. and depth brought to the popular song, if you like. So when he sings Carrickfergus, accompanied by the chieftains, just a harp and his voice, as the father says cheerio to the boy, he brings a level of depth and soul to that is transformative and transcendent. So he was a major addition. He wrote all of the mood music, the saxophone music, in response to the script. He came to cuts of the film and he offered suggestions for sort of arrangement changes that were sensitive to the film, and generally was an immense ally, and we were very thrilled to see him there. We played the film on Thursday of last week in Belfast, first night at the Belfast Film Festival. It was a hell of a night for us, and he was there and we were all there, and the music really sang.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I could keep talking to you for so much longer, but I am getting the signal. I think the time has come. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks, Jeff.
And I do have one last question for Jude. Having wrapped the film, what do you think? Are you going to keep going with this?
101%.
Excellent. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Jude.